Good evening, everybody. Mr. Panda here from Manly Battleships to deliver another Last Week in Geek. You'll notice the chair next to me is empty. That's because Rockstar is under the weather, so it's up to me to deliver this week's Last Week in Geek, all by myself. Won't this be exciting? First things first, someone has commented on the fact that we have an awesome Van Dread wall scroll. No one mentions when we have the other awesome ones, but what you may not have noticed if you didn't pay attention to the older podcast episodes is, dun dun dun, we've got two. So for this week's Last Week in Geek, we got a couple different things to talk about, so let's just dive right into it. We're going to be talking about streaming stuff this week, because a couple different things have happened. First and foremost, Disney Plus is finally officially on the docket. They had the big announcement just a couple days ago, which shot my Disney stock through the roof. So while I kind of hate the whole splintering of the streaming service world, I'm not going to complain on the portfolio end of things, if you know what I mean. Disney Plus is going to be $6.99 a month, and it's going to have, sounds like a three-prong approach to cornering its part of the market. You have, of course, the standard Disney catalog that's already available for you, which will be moving off of Netflix. But then, in terms of new content development, that seems to be what Disney wants to concentrate on to get people to subscribe to the service. We have had a bunch of potential Marvel content being announced, including things for Hawkeye, potentially coming up Wanda and Vision, Loki, Falcon, and Winter Soldier, in addition to the Peggy Carter character potentially returning. Whether that's going to be alternate timeline or still connected to the regular timeline, we don't know. But excited to find out, despite having to potentially pay for yet another streaming service. On that same vein, incidentally, DC has also announced its price point, which is a whole dollar more, $7.99 a month to get the DC stuff. Now, first and foremost, yeah, I'm still feeling that whole, why is this happening? But for DC, this actually kind of makes sense if you stop and think about it, because DC has kind of had a little bit of a rough road when it comes to big releases. Even if they make their money back, they're not exactly the most critically acclaimed things of all time. So having a streaming service that caters specifically to their audience, that people want to be on, and that they can kind of play around with, that gives them the chance to deliver a lot of new content with a much lower risk factor. If a streaming show kind of tanks, it's not as big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. They didn't sink a couple $100 million into making the show. It tends to be a lot lower profile and a lot lower budget. So good for them, even though I probably won't be subscribing to that service anytime soon. You gotta give me something here. Gotta impress me with something. I liked Shazam. Show me what else you got here. In terms of new premieres, that's the next thing on the docket here. We have the newest season of Archer, Season 10, coming out on May 29th. It's going to be Archer 1999, and while I've kind of fallen off the show, personally, it sounds like he's going into space, and that means that I might actually start watching the show again. So I'm super excited about that. 17.4 million of you, however, I've been told, were really excited about another show, Game of Thrones, whose Season 8 premiere, again, had 17.4 million viewers across all platforms, which is amazing. And it spawned all sorts of fun memes, totally non-spoiler memes about, flying elephants and Dumbo and Queen Cersei, and I'm all about that. I finally actually watched this episode just before I got over here to do the recording. I'm waiting to see how they wrap things up here. It's not exactly connected to what George Martin is allegedly doing with the books, and that's perfectly fine. I'm all about adaptations being different, but they're running out of surprises at this point unless they kill at least half of the remaining cast, which actually, yeah, I probably wouldn't put that past them. So if you hadn't already heard, it is confirmed that Stan Lee's final cameo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe will be in Endgame. So, c'est la vie, and thanks for all your work, Stan Lee. And we will duly note your final cameo in this movie, which we all have tickets for, by the way. Do you have your Endgame tickets yet? We are going to go see it on April 25th, so the Thursday night, like the preview night. First showing as far as we know. So we'll be in touch on YouTube here the moment we're done with that, just so you know ahead of time. We'll try not to be spoilers, but we're going to let you know what we think about the movie. Two kind of important things in gaming news. First and foremost, it sounds like Star Wars The Old Republic is getting another expansion called Onslaught. It's going to put you right in the middle of the Sith versus the Republic, and it's going to be a new planet and a lot of different things kind of coming in there. So if you're into the Star Wars games, that's exciting news for you. On the other hand, the streaming service issue takes a new and entirely different turn, where it sounds like Apple wants to revive what Atari tried to do a long time ago, and Apple Arcade is going to be debuting sometime in the near future with over 100 games that you can download and play as much as you want across all your platforms. And it's a $500 million investment on Apple to bring this service to reality. So it's going to be interesting to see where this takes us. If you were watching our podcast episodes from before, you'll know that we had an episode where we kind of dived into the whole concept of streaming games and the future of what PC gaming is going to look like. So this will be an interesting revival of an old concept in a new form. And I'm interested at least to see where the technology is and how popular the service becomes as casual gaming continues to build up to be what's mainstream, what everyone's making their money off of. If you also haven't heard, even though it was all over the Weeaboo Facebook feeds, the casting for Netflix's take on Cowboy Bebop has been announced, at least most of the major characters. We have John Cho in the role of Spike Spiegel, of course, the main character. A couple other big names attached to it, including Mustafa Shakir. And interesting casting choice, in my opinion, Alex Hassel as Vicious, the main antagonist of the show. Now, I don't see any castings on the list that I object to in any strong way. I mean, they're going to pick who they're going to pick, and so far, Netflix has been decent. We know that how some people feel about Death Note, and I respectfully disagree to the extent that it really was not that bad, and they made a lot of decent casting choices, even though some were definitely better than others. This one I'm a little more confident about, primarily because Cowboy Bebop takes place in a kind of pluralistic future where a lot of different things could happen, and it doesn't feel as odd to make the casting choices that you want. If anything, like I feel like John Cho has really kind of demonstrated what he's able to do already. And if there were, who else are you going to put in that role? I think John Cho is a pretty decent choice all around. The only other person that I could possibly see playing Spike Spiegel that just off the top of my head is like, oh, that guy would fit that role, would be Mark Dacascos. And the reason I'm familiar with Mark Dacascos is because he actually played in another anime live-action adaptation called Crying Freeman, which was an American-Canadian film that you probably have never seen, but up until recently was my favorite example of live-action adaptation that's was reasonably faithful to its original source material, and it came out in the 90s. This is a pretty old film. Probably the issue, I think at this point, it's 15 years too late for him to get the role. Also, you probably know him from something else entirely. Yeah, that guy. So I think John Cho will work out fine, and I'm cautiously optimistic about what the Cowboy Bebop show is going to look like on Netflix. Only thing that we have left to talk about on this week's Last Week in Geek is the ongoing war between PewDiePie and T-Series, where again PewDiePie overtook, but just recently got overtaken again by T-Series, and T-Series is back in at number one at the time of this recording. Is that going to stay that way? Who knows at this point? But what is really interesting is that attached to this story is a much bigger development, at least as far as mainstream news is and should be concerned. T-Series has decided to take their complaint against PewDiePie to court. And according to the Hindustani Times, T-Series actually got an injunction, a preliminary one, against PewDiePie's videos, both Bitch Lasagna and Congratulations, to get them blocked in India. So if you are in India and accessing YouTube from a Indian IP address, you cannot view either of those videos right now unless you go through a virtual private network, a VPN. How long is this going to last? We're not entirely sure. Now, there's been an actual hearing date for these proceedings set in July, but it sounds like the judge is not feeling very friendly towards PewDiePie. And it's just like, this is not the greatest situation for the world of free speech. So if you ever have a conversation with someone about free speech and it's, it doesn't really need to be worried about in the age of digital internet things, well, surprise, guys, if you make fun of a big corporation and they don't like it, well, they'll find ways to make sure your content can't be accessed. That's where we're at right now. That's about everything that I have to talk about here, especially since I'm alone. Thank you for watching. You did hear that we just wrapped up from KogaraCon at the last video, and we don't have any other con appearances, barring any last-minute developments at least. So our next major convention appearance will actually be ColossalCon Prime in Sandusky, Ohio. It's going to be a big one. We got a lot planned. We're doing I think at least 8 hours of content, but the schedule isn't out yet, so I can't tell you too much about it. If you haven't been to ColossalCon, now's the time to consider it. It's kind of hard to get a room at the hotel itself, but there are outlying hotels, and there are people that you can network with to try to find space. It's a really great time, and it's be there or be square, guys. So, until next time, I'm Mr. Panda from Manly Battleships. Rockstar will be feeling better soon, we hope, and we'll see you next time.